Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Tonight, a young mother fails to show up for work. Her 5-year-old daughter is also missing.
It's a huge panic. And at that point, we mobilize every possible resource that we have.
Talia, honey, if you're watching this, love you. Stay strong, honey. Please, if you have Talia, please let her come home to her family.
She will be found. It's time.
We've got a missing child. We're now day 2.5 almost. The 24 hours is clicking. If she's alive, we need to know where she is.
The 2 fingerprints that were located were identified to the same individual.
Police can question a suspect for 24 hours, so that would take us to about 10:30 tonight. Again, police are reminding anyone, if you see Talia or you know where she is being held or located, you need to call 911.
I mean, it takes a certain type of person that could harm somebody like that.
Here now is Nancy Hixt with the story of Sara and Talia. Stolen dreams.
In early July 2016, the Calgary Stampede was well underway. For 10 days every summer, the greatest outdoor show on earth attracts millions of visitors. Sara Bailey, a young single mother, was enjoying the festivities with her 5-year-old daughter, Talia.
They were 2 peas in a pod, right? You couldn't go somewhere without the other. Or Talia following Sara around the house like a puppy, like a lost puppy, right? Just Talia had to be where Sara was at all times. So that was kind of their relationship, I guess.
Just days later, the celebration would be overshadowed by tragedy. On July 11th, 2016, Sara and Talia disappeared.
So Sara's day was supposed to start with her dropping off Talia at the daycare center. She was then supposed to go for a tanning appointment and then go to work. She worked at the Chili's up at the airport. Sara was very punctual, she was very dependable, and for her to be late was very much out of character. In addition to not showing up, there were some very strange texts that were appearing on her various friends' phones from Sara's phone. And of course, we didn't have that information right away, but once we started looking at those texts, and once we started comparing it to how people were telling us Sara would communicate, it became very obvious that those texts were very, very suspicious. Sara was a very verbose person. She liked to talk. She wouldn't respond with one-word answers. She was very polite on the phone. And these texts were the exact opposite of that. There was one-word responses, there were cryptic responses, there was rude responses.
Family members went to Sara's home in the Northwest Calgary community of Panorama. But there was no sign of her or Talia.
I ended up getting a phone call from my uncle saying that they couldn't find Sara or Talia, and told me that police were at her house trying to search for her, or trying to find some kind of clue of maybe where she went.
So Sara's family had called just the regular CPS line and said that Sara was missing. So a uniformed constable was dispatched to the scene, and he started a missing person investigation.
The officer didn't find anything suspicious. There was no sign of forced entry.
At 5:30 or so, he met with the family. He did a cursory search of her basement apartment in Panorama. He did some checks with Talia's biological father. He did some checks with the RTOC to have her phone pinged. He checked the hospitals. Basic missing person reflex tasking is what that constable did.
In the meantime, Sarah's family took a drive to check out nearby movie theaters and grocery stores. By then, it was nearly 8 p.m., and Sara had been gone for hours. The first responding officer went back into Sara's home for another look.
On a gut feeling, he did a secondary search of the house. Sara's vehicle was gone, her purse was there. He just had that feeling that there was something else he had to do.
The officer checked the bedrooms. When he got to Taliyah's closet, he used a flashlight to get a better look.
So if someone was passing by, if someone was just doing a quick search, it would appear that there was a pile of laundry in the closet. Something about that configuration of clothing, something about where that pile of laundry was, he thought there was something wrong, and that's why he started digging through and he found her body. It was very clear that her body was placed into that bag. It was very clear that her body was bound with duct tape. It was very clear that someone had concealed her body in an effort to, in an effort to hide the homicide.
Family was given the crushing news that Sara was dead. But there was no time to mourn the loss. 5-year-old Talia was still missing.
Coming up, with no time to waste, police issue a major alert to help track down little Talia. Welcome back to Crime Beat. Police discover the body of a young single mother, but her 5-year-old daughter is still missing. We now return to the story of Sara and Talia, stolen dreams.
It's a huge panic, and at that point we mobilize every possible resource that we have. I don't think it's any exaggeration to say at any given time we had between 100 and 200 or more officers working at various tasks.
At 1:40 in the morning on July 12, 2016, Calgary police issued an Amber Alert. This is an absolutely heartbreaking case. A family is now grieving the loss of Sara Bailey, but they're trying to cling to the hope that her daughter Talia will be found alive. At this hour, there are more than 100 police officers working around the clock trying to bring this little girl home safe.
There's two things at play. One is the investigation on behalf of Sara, and the other for Talia. Right now our focus is doing everything we can to get as much information out there to have Talia safely returned. Somebody out there knows where Talia is, and that person or those people need to do the right thing, step up and make that happen.
At this point, police haven't named any suspects, and the Amber Alert remains in effect. Investigators say that Talia's estranged father has been cooperating with police, but they admit that there is a history of domestic violence between Colin Marsman and Sara Bailey. In court documents obtained by Global News, Bailey said she feared Marsman would cause her personal injury. Marsman was charged with unlawful confinement of Bailey and the threat of violence to prevent her from using her cell phone to contact police. Those charges were withdrawn in exchange for him undergoing a peace bond in March of 2015. He had a list of 12 conditions to follow, including no contact with Bailey. He was not allowed to come within a 2-block radius of her home. Marsman was also ordered to undergo treatment for drug and alcohol abuse, domestic violence, and anger management. Right now, police say they have not named any suspects, and again, they are saying that Marsman is cooperating.
The only person I thought maybe that would have done her harm would have been Colin. And I'm not trying to badmouth Colin in any shape, way, or form. I just know the personality of him. And I know the personality of Sara, and them two are like oil and water at times. So My first maybe assumption was maybe he had something to do with it, or maybe he took Talia. I have no idea. I mean,
Family and friends joined investigators at Calgary Police Headquarters to make a public plea for Talia's safe return.
To those who have taken Talia Lee Marsman, Sarah's daughter, please return her. Drop her off at an RCMP station, Calgary Police Service station, or grocery store, gas station, wherever you want. Contact the family. We'll come and pick her up. There will be no questions asked. We love her. We miss her. And we want her back. Marilyn, do you have something to say to Talia?
Talia, honey, if you're watching this, love you. Stay strong, honey. Please, if you have Talia, please let her come home to her family.
We miss her, and we love her. Sarah was a beautiful young woman who was single-handedly pretty much raising her daughter, and we love her and we miss her. Talia is a vivacious, wonderful child, curious. She lives in our hearts when we're not with her, and she's in our thoughts also. Talia has many interests. One would be just on her iPad. The other, Marilyn has just recently taught her to ride a bicycle.
Perfect.
The bicycle sits in our garage waiting for her to come back. She will be found. It's time.
Police released surveillance video of Sara and Talia at a fast food restaurant taken on July 10th, the day before they went missing.
That's the last time we had Sara alive on video. We have our search people do a 300-meter search of the area. And not only are we looking for videotapes or CCTV cameras, we're looking for anything with a lens. That includes transit, that includes taxi cabs, or homes that have CCTV. We're also talking to people and asking, did you see anything suspicious? Very quickly, the search guys found Sara's vehicle, her white Ford Fusion, parked around the corner just off a main road, about 300 yards away from where Sara lived.
Police went door to door in search of anyone who may have seen Talia.
We were very lucky because there was a retired couple, and the retired couple were able to tell us about what time that white vehicle showed up. And of course, they noted it because it didn't belong in the neighborhood. They also gave us a very quick vehicle description. They told us that about the same time the white Fusion appeared, there was they described it as a gray or teal Chrysler 300 with very dark tinted windows. And they told us that a little girl who they thought was about 10 years old, who was dressed in pink clothing, was taken from the white car, the Ford Fusion, into the Chrysler 300. And they said that accompanying that little girl was a male who was about 5'6", 5'7", stocky build, and carrying a suitcase that appeared to be an old-style steamer kind of a suitcase that appeared to be full. It was carrying, they described it as having some weight. And they told us that it looked like the little girl had been crying. The fact that there was a suitcase seen by the witnesses gave us a great deal of hope. We really, really believed that it was likely that this was a kidnapping, orchestrated by someone. We didn't know for sure who it was. Certainly the child custody was a viable theory, but the suitcase nonetheless made us believe that there was a really good chance we were going to find this little girl alive.
After the break, the case takes a shocking turn as police identify a suspect. As witnesses come forward, police slowly unravel the mystery behind the tragedy that was unfolding. We now return to Nancy Hixt with the story of Sara and Talia, stolen dreams.
Investigators released photos of the vehicle believed to be involved in Talia's disappearance.
Once we were finally able to download that and go through it, you could actually see that it wasn't a Chrysler 300, it was a gray Dodge Charger. No other vehicle goes to or from that side of the street. We're fairly certain this vehicle is involved. So one of the things we do is we task our analyst with trying to find some information about anyone associated to the file, anyone who is associated to either side of the family, associated to Sara in any way, shape, or form, who might drive a gray Charger, which is a huge amount of vehicles, especially for the city of Calgary.
As they worked to determine the owner of the vehicle, investigators were faced with a difficult choice.
Now that we know we are likely looking for a gray Charger, I have to make a decision. And the decision is, do I release that information to the public, that we're now looking for a gray Charger, or do I keep that information within the police service and try and find it independently? So at this point we have an advantage because they wouldn't know that we now know what the kidnapping vehicle was. So we debated it, and I made the decision to give it 24 hours, do everything we can to find this Charger, and then we do a release to the public.
In the meantime, Talia's father, Colin Marsman, broke his silence and spoke with Global News.
I'm finding out the same thing as everybody at the same time as everybody else. I stay glued to the TV, and I'm finding out the same thing as everybody else at the same time. And I'm praying, and I believe that I'm going to see her soon, and I just can't wait to see my daughter.
At this point, we had considered Colin Marsman, Talia's father, a very viable suspect. There was certainly a history of both reported and apparently unreported violence. There was a fairly contentious court hearing from the Thursday before the Monday, and we were told that in that court hearing there may have been some accidental disclosure of Sara's address. We had heard that there may have been an increase in the child support that was ordered, but this all didn't come from the transcript, of course, from the court hearing. This came from second and third hand sources, some of which it wasn't exactly accurate. But at the end of the day, it certainly looked like Colin was a very viable suspect for the murders. So much so that we had surveillance on him, I think within a couple of hours of the file being started. We had an emergency wiretap done for the sole purpose of trying to locate the missing child.
And was he cooperating?
He was. Colin was interviewed by us. He answered all the questions. He allowed us to search his house without any sort of resistance.
But the investigation turned in a whole new direction as soon as police learned more about the suspect vehicle.
And it turned out that the best friend, Sara's best friend, self-identified best friend, who was at the house with the parents, had registered to her a gray Dodge Charger of the right vintage, of the right year. Needless to say, once we identified the owner of the gray Charger, it changed the file.
The owner of the suspect vehicle was Sara's best friend.
I asked the interviewer who was dealing with her to show her a picture of the car and ask her what she thought about that. And her response was to utter an expletive and said, "That's my car." As soon as she saw the picture, her response was, "That's my car." And that's when the name Edward Downey first came into the investigation. And this is about 6 o'clock at night on the 13th. She tells us that Edward Downey is her live-in boyfriend. She tells us that he's the one that drives her car predominantly, and that the last time she saw him was earlier that day when he had dropped her off for work. She admitted this much to us. He was probably dealing drugs on the side. He didn't work, he didn't have a job. When we started doing his background checks, he had been involved in prostitution in the past. He had a record for robbery.
Edward Downey matched the description given to police by two of Sara Bailey's neighbors.
Edward Downey was about 5'7" and probably 200 pounds, so quite short, quite stocky.
We are learning more about the suspect in this case. He is being questioned here at police headquarters in Northeast Calgary. It has been about 80 hours since little Talia was last seen, and the desperate search continues.
The gray sedan has been recovered. We have that vehicle. The person we have in custody, we believe, is the driver of that vehicle. And we believe at this point that the person we have in custody is the individual that witnesses saw.
Again, police can question a suspect for 24 hours, so that would take us to about 10:30 tonight. Again, police are reminding anyone, if you see Talia or you know where she is being held or located, you need to call 911.
He initially says he knows nothing. He's very relaxed, he's a little bit sarcastic, but he claims to have absolutely no knowledge of where Talia is and absolutely no knowledge about what happened to Sara. He goes so far as to say, you guys need to go do your jobs because I've got nothing to do with this. We've got a missing child. We're now day 2.5 almost. The 24 hours is clicking. If she's alive, we need to know where she is.
But Downey still refused to talk.
Coming up, with the suspect refusing to cooperate, investigators use advancements in technology to try and find Talia. While the search for Talia continues, police learn more about the suspected killer's past. Here again is Nancy Hixt with the story of Sara and Talia, Stolen Dreams.
Police exhausted every technique possible to try and find Talia. That included mapping out Edward Downey's cell phone usage.
We're very fortunate that we're able to get those cell phone results very, very quickly. So we assign, of course, the analyst starts working with those cell phone numbers. She starts working with the tower locations, the azimuth, the beam, all the stuff that she's been trained to do. And what she finds is that on July 11th, between say around 4 and 4:30, Downey's cell phone travels east of the city and back in about a 15-minute time period.
6 towers were used in a matter of about 7 minutes. I looked at the side of each of the 6 towers that were used in that 7 minutes. I drew them on a map and I looked for the area that overlapped, that all 7 towers, 6 or 7 towers, would provide coverage to.
With the analyst's map as a guide, the search moved outside of Calgary.
We're going to touch base with Nancy Hicks, who is on the ground on this grid search that is occurring east of our city. Nancy, what can you tell us right now?
Well, you can see the officers right behind me searching. They're going through the ditches. There is an area where the officers have zeroed in on, and they are setting up a tarp in that area. It's where our global chopper is right now. Right now you're seeing here as well, the officers are going into some of the fields. They're doing grid searches. They each have sticks, and anytime they find something, they are putting down a flag and marking the area. Right now they're searching for any kind of evidence that they can find at all in relation to the Amber Alert, and of course everyone hoping to find some piece of evidence that could lead them to find little Talia and bring her home safe. As dozens of officers scoured the countryside, Trish Pace continued to analyze cell phone data to narrow the search zone even further.
I knew in my gut that I felt that it was a body recovery. And so now I have to tell a room full of investigators that are trying to find this girl that's alive that I now think that she's dead. So my next task from Scott to try to keep me on target was, okay, now you think that she's out there somewhere, you need to tell us where to look. I put a map together that shows the overlapping areas. I draw a circle on the map of that area that overlaps, And I said, she's in here somewhere. And so I looked at the circle and I pointed to the trees and I said, you need to start there. And so they relocated the search team, and then within a very short time of them reestablishing down on the south part, they had found Taliyah's remains.
It is the worst possible conclusion to a story that's gripped our city, our province, our entire country. Everyone holding out hope all week now turned to heartbreak.
Nancy Hicks has been following this story since the outset. Nancy is live tonight from Calgary Police Headquarters, where a late-night news conference just wrapped up. Nancy, so much pain for so many.
It's hard to put into words how I'm feeling tonight, how I know we're all feeling tonight. This is absolute heartbreak. We were all holding out hope that there would be a happy ending and that little Taliyah would be found. And tonight, police delivered the worst possible news.
We are very saddened to be announcing today that we believe we have found the body of 5-year-old Taliyah Marsman. My sincere condolences go out to the family and friends of Taliyah, as well as her mother, who we also found deceased last Monday. Over the last 72 hours, we've had approximately 100 police officers at times working around the clock with the goal of finding young Taliyah, and unfortunately they are completely devastated by the loss, as am I.
46-year-old Edward Downey was taken to the arrest processing late tonight. He is now charged with the first-degree murder of both 5-year-old Taliyah Marsman and her mother, Sara Bailey. He has an extensive history with police. Global News has confirmed he has prior convictions for trafficking cocaine and a prostitution-related case. He will be held in custody. Police say they can't speak to motive yet, but he is known to his victims.
We believe that Mr. Downey is known to both, or all three, Sara, Taliyah, and the father, Colin. We believe that to be the case.
Police believe Taliyah was likely killed before the Amber Alert was even issued early Tuesday morning. Again, this is just heartbreak. I can't even begin to tell you the mood here at Calgary Police Headquarters, but this has affected all of us. And, you know, everyone all across the country has hoped for a positive result, and so this is just devastating news that little Taliyah was found dead.
To the family and friends of Sara and Taliyah, I am so deeply sorry for the loss of two people whom you loved and loved you. Families across this country, parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, siblings, are grieving alongside you.
I know that when I eventually got home, I went to both my girls' bedrooms and gave them a hug while they were sleeping. You know, but doing this job for any length of time, you have to be very good at compartmentalizing things. If you allow your emotions to compromise your intellect, if you allow your emotions to overwhelm you, you're no good to anybody, and certainly not the victims. So you stay the course, you rely on each other to strengthen each other when you need to, and you get the job done. Because quite frankly, if you don't, it's not going to get done.
On July 21st, 2016, a celebration of life was held for Sara and Taliyah.
Today we gather together with a profound sense of unspeakable grief to somehow make sense of a senseless tragedy.
They will be sadly missed and will leave a huge hole in our hearts.
I guess I want the world to know that Sara was a very special girl. And Taliyah was the light of her life. And it's nice that they've taken this journey with us. We don't like the outcome of the journey.
She was a joy, right? Like, just, I don't even know how to explain it, really. It would just brighten your day. You'd see her and she'd come up and say, "Uncle Mikey, let's go fishing." Of course, we're out on the balcony or front step, and I'm trying to teach her how to cast. Or I'd have to go to Safeway because it was across the store, or across the street, sorry. And The parking lot's full of water. I said, well, I don't think you should come. Well, put your rain boots on and your rain gear, let's go. And of course, she had to find the biggest puddle to jump in, and she said, Uncle Mikey, come. That's all. You know, I'd jump in it too, right? Then we'd walk home and open up the door, and she's all soaking wet. And of course, Mom is, what did you do? Right, so, yeah, it was always a joy.
They're gone, but we still have their memories. And hopefully the pain will ease in time, but I know it's never going to go away.
The police investigation continued in the months that followed, and slowly more information came to light about the man accused of this horrific crime. According to documents obtained by Global News from the Parole Board of Canada, Edward Downey's criminal history dates back to 1990, when he was 20 years old. The board noted he had relied on the use of prostitution and drug trafficking to support himself, and said it is evident he lived a criminally entrenched lifestyle, choosing to rely on criminal means to support himself rather than find and keep legitimate employment. He was granted release from prison in May of 2010, 6 years before Sara and Talia were killed.
Coming up, with the killer now behind bars, the motive behind these brutal murders comes to light. As the trial gets underway, the accused double murderer takes the stand in his own defense. Here's Nancy Hixt with the conclusion of Sara and Talia, Stolen Dreams.
In November of 2018, Edward Downey stood trial in front of a jury, accused of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The courtroom was filled with family and friends of Sara Bailey and her daughter Talia Marsman, and many broke down as details of their deaths came out in court. Edward Downey has pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder. The prosecution began by laying out its theory against Downey, alleging Sara Bailey was killed because she was trying to get her best friend to break up with Downey and trying to help her friend stay away from life as an escort. The prosecution told the jury Downey was known to both Sara and Talia through a woman known as A.B. A.B.'s identity is protected by a court-imposed publication ban. Downey was A.B.'s boyfriend. She was Sara's best friend.
And there was lots of rumors that were going around, lots of speculation. But what the evidence, and always following the evidence, which is the right thing to do, the evidence really indicated, strongly indicated, that Mr. Downey was trying to get Sara's best friend, A.B., to get involved in prostitution. Based on some of the text conversations we found, it was very clear that Mr. Downey had a lot of, I'm going to use the word that the Crown used and the judge or the justice used, animus, a lot of anger and hatred towards Sara, based on the text conversations we were able to recover. At the end of the day, we think that Sara was murdered because she tried to do the right thing. And we think that Talia was murdered because a career criminal couldn't think of anything better to do with the witness.
The medical examiner shared graphic evidence with the jury. Sara died of asphyxiation. She was beaten, strangled, and bound with duct tape.
The duct tape was located around the face and neck area of Sara, as well as her wrists. I worked with a pathologist, and we found an area where it appeared that none of the ends were located, and he diligently cut straight through with a scalpel, and then we just removed it all in one piece. There were 3 partial fingerprints that were located on the upper portion of the tape that was located on her head and neck area. 2 were actually identifiable. The 3rd one just did not have enough detail to really do a full comparison, so that one was not identified. So the 2 fingerprints that were located were identified to the same individual.
Those prints came back as a match to Edward Downey. Both were from Downey's left forefinger, left on the tape where it was torn.
Now, I've done forensics for 11 years and I've examined tons of different types of tape, and you very rarely get a really nice print that you can identify on the sticky side of the tape. So the fact that we did get such a great print to identify was just, like I said, it was one of those moments in your career where it's like, oh, okay, this is what all the training was for.
Court heard Taliyah's body was found in the narrowed search zone mapped out by crime analyst Trish Pace.
Cell phone ping showed us that on the night before, at about 11:30 at night on July 10th, that phone in the back of the charger had driven within a block and a half of Sara's house and had left little GPS breadcrumbs. So I believe that was probably Downey doing a recce of Sara's house before he showed up the next morning.
Taliyah was dumped near a farmer's field, where there was a break in some bushes. The medical examiner determined Taliyah also died from asphyxiation, likely caused by smothering and strangulation.
I mean, it takes a certain type of person that could harm somebody like that, especially an innocent child that had nothing to do with the situation at all. So, I mean, that's a tough pill to swallow, that there's people out there that could actually do that to a young child. Like, it just, there's no words to explain it, right? There was a lot of anger, right? There was, let's just say it was this, if I had superpowers and I could stare at him and put him through hell, that's what I would have done if I could have, right?
As the trial continued, the prosecution presented evidence that connected Downey to both murders.
We found DNA under Sara's fingertips and DNA embedded in the fabric of the laundry bag that we found Sara's body in. That was a patrilineal match to Mr. Downey. It wasn't unique to Downey, but again, it was one more piece of that wall that the Crown was building to convict him.
Edward Downey took the stand in his own defense and denied any involvement in the killings. He claimed he arranged to meet 2 men at Sara's home to buy drugs. He testified that one of those men, named Terrence, argued with Sara, and at one point Terrence yelled out for tape. Downey said that's how his fingerprints got on the duct tape. He said he ripped off a piece and passed it to Terrence. To explain why he was east of the city, he said he went there to check out one of Terrence's old drug stash spots, but changed his mind and went back to the city.
We flew investigators to both coasts of the country, tracking down any possible associate, relative, friend of Downey's who could have been this Terrence Williams.
Do you believe he made that person up?
I absolutely do. I absolutely do.
The prosecution called Downey's version of events absurd and told jurors both killings were planned and deliberate, and presented that both Sara and Taliyah were unlawfully confined and dominated before they were murdered. After 3.5 weeks of graphic evidence, jurors were tasked with determining Downey's guilt or innocence.
Breaking news from the Calgary Court Centre, where Edward Downey is guilty as charged. A jury taking less than 3 hours to convict him of killing 5-year-old Talia Marsman and her mother, Sara Bailey.
There was cheering, hugging, and tears in the Calgary courtroom as the jury found Edward Downey guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Sara Bailey and her daughter, Talia Marsman.
Now I can go home and bury Sara and Talia's ashes and forever let them rest in peace. Our hope is that in time, And little by little, this powerful love we feel for the girls will gradually take up more and more space in our minds each and every day. That pictures and sounds of the happier times will settle on us and drive out the darkness that has become part of our daily lives for the most recent past.
First-degree murder comes with an automatic life sentence with no chance of parole for at least 25 years. What still needs to be decided is if Downey should face consecutive parole ineligibilities. If that happens, Downey would not be able to apply for any kind of a release for 50 years. 11 out of 12 jurors recommended Downey spend 50 years behind bars before he can apply for parole.
And that's what the justice ruled in this case.
Downey will be approximately 96 years old when he can apply for parole.
Downey appealed both his conviction and sentence. His conviction appeal was dismissed, but in 2022, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled consecutive parole ineligibilities for multiple murderers is unconstitutional. That means Downey will serve life in prison, but he'll be eligible to apply for parole after 25 years. Down a path along the banks of the Bow River on the west side of Calgary, there's a peaceful place where you can hear the water flowing and birds chirping. From this spot, you can see a small sandbar across the river where Talia loved trying out the fishing rod her Uncle Michael bought for her. It's a place where Sara and Talia's loved ones go to remember. There's a bench with an inscription that reads, "In loving memory of Sara and Talia, your laughter will forever fill our hearts."
It's changed the whole dynamic of my family. And I still have my days, right? Talia's birthday or Sarah's birthday. And the other time that's hard is, Christmas. She had a heart of gold, right? So she would help me out if ever I needed it. All I had to do was make a phone call and she'd help me or say, "Hey, I can't do it right now, but can I do it later?" or whatever. So I always had that with her. I could always count on Sara if I needed her, right? So that's what I miss. And someone to talk to, right? There's some people that you don't tell certain things to, but with Sara, I could tell her anything. I might not have liked her opinion, but, I'm sure she didn't like mine half the time either, right? So, but I miss that about Sara, and Talia was just her laugh.
What do you say?
And her smile, and her personality, I can't explain it, right? So I miss that. And to see her not grow up into her teenage years, to see what she would have been like now, if she was still around, I don't know what. I think she would have been an amazing young woman. I think the stars were hers to grab, whatever she wanted. She was smart. So all she just needed was more time to turn into who she was going to be.
I'm Talia, and I know how to dance. And my mom is so crazy. Her hair looks so beautiful, but she's really crazy, and I am not, which I'm so pretty.
Talia's father, Colin Marsman, has since passed away. Talia's family created a dance scholarship in her honor called the Talia Lee Memorial Scholarship Award, given to children who share her passion for dance. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
To learn more about this case, subscribe and listen to my Crime Beat podcast for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And for previous episodes of Crime Beat TV, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.